The moment my daughter-in-law started crying at my birthday dinner, I knew something was wrong. But I never imagined it had anything to do with me. Not at first. I remember the exact second it happened. The room was warm, almost too warm. The kind of warmth that comes from too many bodies packed into one space and an oven that's been on since early morning. The candles on my cake flickered like they were tired of standing upright, and everyone was clapping, off-key too, loudly, laughing at themselves more than celebrating me. That's when I saw her. Lena. She was sitting at the far end of the table, hands folded tightly in her lap, shoulders stiff like she was bracing herself for bad news. When our eyes met, her lips trembled. Not a smile, not a polite nod. They trembled, and then her face crumpled, slow and quiet, like she was trying not to make a sound while something heavy collapsed inside her. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I'm sorry," she whispered, already turning away. And just like that, my birthday paused. The clapping died mid-beat. Someone laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. My son, Adam, pushed his chair back, his forehead creasing in confusion. "Lena?" he said. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer. She hurried toward the hallway, one hand covering her mouth, the other pressed flat against her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from falling out. I stood there, the candles still burning in front of me, wax dripping onto white frosting, while everyone waited for me to react. "Should I?" Adam asked. I nodded slowly. "Go, check on her." He followed her down the hallway, leaving behind a room full of guests and unanswered questions. Someone finally leaned forward and blew out the candles for me. Smoke curled up between us, thin and bitter. I remember thinking how strange it was that the day I'd turned 62 would smell like burnt sugar and confusion. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe stress, maybe hormones. Lena had always been sensitive, quiet, the kind of woman who felt things deeply but spoke softly about them. Still, as I cut the cake and passed around slices, a knot settled in my stomach. Because you don't cry like that unless something's already broken. Before that night, my life was simple in the way older lives tend to be. Predictable, comfortable, quiet, but not lonely. I lived in the same house I'd raised Adam in, a modest two-story with creaky stairs and a fig tree in the backyard that refused to die no matter how many winters passed. Every morning, I woke up at 6, made tea, and stood at the kitchen window watching the light creep across the neighbor's fence. I worked part-time at the local library, mostly organizing returns and helping older folks find books they'd already read 3 times. It wasn't exciting, but it was steady, honest. I liked that. Adam was my only child. His father passed away when Adam was 23, too young, too sudden, too unfair. For years after, it felt like Adam and I were clinging to the same piece of driftwood, trying not to drown in our shared grief. When he married Lena, I was relieved. Not because I needed someone to replace me in his life, but because I wanted him to have joy again, real joy, the kind that doesn't feel borrowed or temporary. Lena was polite when we first met, soft-spoken. She always asked before doing anything in my house, even after Adam insisted she didn't need to. Her hands folded when she spoke, eyes downcast, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "You raised him well," she told me once, while helping me dry dishes. Her voice was barely louder than the running water. I remember smiling. I did my best, and I meant it. After they married, they moved into a small apartment across town. We saw each other every few weeks, Sunday lunches, birthdays, holidays. Nothing unusual, nothing strained. At least, not that I noticed. I never interfered in their marriage. I didn't ask questions about money or plans or children. I believed that respect meant distance, and distance meant peace. So when Lena cried at my birthday, it felt like a crack in a picture I assumed was whole. The next morning, Adam came by alone. He sat at my kitchen table, the same one he'd done homework on as a boy, and stirred his coffee without drinking it. "She said she wasn't feeling well," he told me. "She's been tired lately, overwhelmed." I nodded, watching the spoon circle the mug again and again. "Did she say what upset her?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, she just kept apologizing, said she didn't mean to ruin your night." "I didn't feel ruined," I said softly. "I was worried." He looked up then, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. "She loves you. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe him. After he left, I stood alone in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the clock tick on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded louder than usual. That week, Lena didn't call, she didn't text. When I sent her a message, "Are you feeling better?" she replied hours later with a short, careful sentence, "Yes, I'm sorry again about the other night." Nothing more. Something in my chest tightened. I told myself not to read into it. People have bad days. Families don't come with guarantees. Still, I couldn't shake the image of her face at the table, how her eyes had filled before she could stop them, like she'd been carrying too much for too long. And somewhere deep down, a quiet thought began to form. What if that night wasn't all about stress at all? What if it was about guilt? I didn't know it yet, but the answers were already circling closer, waiting for the right moment to land. After that birthday, I tried to return to my routines the way people do when they don't want to think too hard about what's changed. I went back to the library. I watered the fig tree. I folded laundry while listening to the radio announcer mispronounce author names. Life kept moving, and I moved with it, at least on the outside. But something had shifted. Lena used to stop by with Adam every few weeks, usually bringing something small she'd baked or picked up from the bakery near their apartment. Lemon bread, soft rolls wrapped in paper. She never came empty-handed. After the birthday, those visits stopped. When I asked Adam about it, he shrugged. "She's busy," he said. "Work's been a lot." I nodded like that explanation settled something in me. It didn't. I wasn't the kind of mother who demanded closeness. I'd spent years reminding myself not to become one of those women who hovered, who counted visits, who turned love into obligation. Still, absence has a way of announcing itself. The quiet grew louder. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to drop off a container of soup. Nothing dramatic, just something warm, something familiar. Lena had always liked my chicken soup, said it reminded her of her grandmother. Their apartment was on the third floor of a brick building that smelled faintly of old carpet and cleaning chemicals. When Adam opened the door, he looked surprised to see me. "Mom," he said, stepping aside, "you didn't call." "I know," I said gently. "I was nearby." That wasn't entirely true, but it felt close enough. Inside, the place was neat, almost too neat. The couch cushions were arranged like no one sat there. The kitchen counters were bare. Lena stood near the window, hands clasped in front of her, like she'd been waiting for a verdict. Her smile was polite, tight. "Hi," she said. I held up the container. "I made soup." She took it with both hands, nodding. "Thank you. You didn't have to." I studied her face. The dark circles under her eyes hadn't been there before. Her hair was pulled back, not the careful way she used to do it, but hurried, loose strands escaping. We sat at the table for a few minutes, making small talk that felt thinner than paper. "How's work?" I asked. "Fine." "Are you sleeping okay?" "Yes." Adam hovered nearby, phone in hand, glancing between us. It felt like a performance where everyone knew their lines but not their feelings. After a while, I stood up. I won't stay long, just wanted to check in. Lena looked relieved and hurt at the same time. As I reached the door, she spoke. "Happy belated birthday," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I turned back. "Lena," I said softly, "if something's wrong—" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing's wrong, I promise." Her eyes darted to Adam. I left with the feeling that I'd just walked past a locked door and pretended I didn't see the handle. A few weeks later, Adam called me late at night. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "do you have a minute?" I sat up in bed, pulling the quilt around my shoulders. "Of course." He hesitated. "Have you noticed anything off with Lena lately?" I closed my eyes. "I thought it was just stress," I said carefully. "Why?" He exhaled. "She's been distant, quiet. I ask her what's wrong, and she says she's fine, but she cries in the bathroom sometimes. I hear her." My chest tightened. "Did she not tell you why she cried at my birthday?" "No," he said. "She just said she was overwhelmed." There it was again, that word, overwhelmed. It had become a curtain we kept pulling closed whenever the truth threatened to peek through. "She loves you," I said, repeating his own words back to him. "Maybe she just needs time." "I hope so," he replied, but his voice didn't sound hopeful. After we hung up, I lay awake listening to the same ticking clock. The sound felt accusatory now, like it was counting down to something. The first real crack came from a place I wasn't expecting. My bank. I was at the kitchen table one morning sorting mail when I noticed an envelope that didn't belong to me. It was addressed to Lena, but it had my address on it. That alone was strange. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't thick, no checks, no pamphlets, just a single folded document inside. I told myself to leave it alone, that opening someone else's mail, even accidentally, was crossing a line. But the address stared back at me. Why is her mail coming here? When I slid the paper out, my fingers started to tremble. It wasn't a letter. It was a statement. A bank statement, with my name on it. Not as the account holder, but as the guarantor. I read the page twice, then a third time. The account number was unfamiliar. The balance made my stomach drop. A large loan, recently approved, recent payments, my address, my signature, or something that looked like it. I sat there, the room suddenly too quiet, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. This must be a mistake, I thought. People don't just open accounts in your name. Family doesn't do that. Accidents happen, clerical errors, mix-ups. Still, my hands were shaking when I called the number listed on the statement. After a long wait and too much hold music, a woman answered. "I'm calling about an account I don't recognize. My name is on it, but I didn't authorize anything." She asked for details, my date of birth, my address. She put me on hold again. When she came back, her tone had changed. "Ma'am," she said, "the account was opened with proper documentation. The signature matches the one we have on file." I swallowed. "That's impossible." "I'm sorry," she replied. "If you believe there's been fraud, you'll need to come in." When I hung up, the kitchen felt unfamiliar, like I was standing in someone else's house. And suddenly, Lena's tears at my birthday took on a different shape. Not embarrassment, not stress, fear. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table with the statement spread out in front of me, my finger tracing numbers I didn't recognize, decisions I hadn't made. One question kept repeating itself louder with each passing hour. Why would my daughter-in-law need my name and my money without telling me? I didn't tell Adam about the bank statement right away. That wasn't because I wanted to hide anything from him. It was because I needed to understand what I was holding before I lit a fire I couldn't put out. I folded the paper and tucked it into the back of my purse, the way you might hide something fragile or dangerous. Then I went about my day like everything was normal, even though my chest felt tight and my thoughts kept circling the same question: how long has this been going on? At the library, I shelved books without really seeing the titles. My hands moved from habit, but my mind stayed in my kitchen, staring at numbers and signatures that didn't belong to me. That afternoon, I went to the bank in person. The branch was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your footsteps sound louder than they should. A young man in a navy tie greeted me with a practiced smile and asked how he could help. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, sliding the statement across the counter. "My name is on an account I didn't open." He studied the paper, typed something into his computer, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I see the account, ma'am. It's a joint loan. You're listed as a guarantor." "I never agreed to that," I replied. He looked at me carefully. "The documents were signed electronically." My throat went dry. "By me?" "Yes." I leaned back in the chair. "That signature isn't mine." He hesitated. "It matches your digital signature from previous transactions." The room felt smaller. "Who opened the account?" I asked. He glanced at the screen. "Your daughter-in-law." The words landed like a dropped plate, sharp, loud, and impossible to ignore. "Why?" I whispered. "I can't discuss her personal reasons," he said gently, "but the funds were used for a business venture." I closed my eyes. Lena had mentioned something once, months ago, about wanting to start something of her own, a small online shop, handmade goods. She'd said it casually, like a passing dream. I'd smiled and told her it sounded lovely. I never imagined she'd chase that dream with my name. "Is there a way to remove myself from this?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not without her consent." I thanked him and walked out, the bell over the door chiming behind me like a warning. That evening, I called Adam. "Can you come over?" I asked. "I need to talk to you." He arrived within the hour, worry etched across his face. "What's wrong?" he asked as soon as he stepped inside. I sat him down at the kitchen table and slid the statement toward him. His eyes scanned the page, confusion giving way to shock. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a loan," I said, "taken out in my name." He looked up at me. "Mom, this has to be a mistake." "I thought so too," I replied. "It isn't." He ran a hand through his hair. "Lena wouldn't do that. She would have told us." "She didn't tell me," I said quietly. He stared at the paper again, his jaw tightening. "I'm going to ask her, right now." "Adam," I said, placing a hand over his, "please, not yet." He looked at me surprised. "Why not?" "Because I need to hear it from her, and I need to know why." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I don't understand. Why would she involve you?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I wanted to say the thought forming in my mind. The next time I saw Lena was by accident. I was at the grocery store, reaching for a jar of jam, when I heard my name. I turned to see her standing a few feet away, holding a basket. "Oh," she said. "Hi." She looked thinner, paler. "Hi," I replied. "How are you?" She shrugged. "Okay." There was an awkward pause. The hum of refrigerators filled the space between us. "Lena," I said gently, "can we talk?" Her eyes flicked toward the exit, then back to me. "About what?" I lowered my voice. "About the account." Her face drained of color. She set the basket down slowly, like it suddenly weighed too much. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "When?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know how." We stood there, between jars and shelves, reality pressing in. "Why?" I asked again. Why would you do this without asking me? Tears filled her eyes. I was desperate. For what? I asked. She shook her head. Not here, please. I nodded. Come to my house tomorrow. She hesitated, then nodded back. That night, I prepared my house like I was expecting a storm. I cleaned, I brewed tea, I set tissues on the table. When Lena arrived the next afternoon, she looked like someone walking toward a confession. She sat across from me, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the table. I never meant to hurt you. I believe you, I replied, but I need the truth. She took a deep breath. I didn't cry at your birthday because I was overwhelmed. I cried because I thought you already knew. My heart skipped. Knew what? I asked. She looked up at me then, ears red, voice barely steady. That the loan wasn't just for a business. The room felt suddenly too quiet. It was to pay off something else, she continued. I leaned forward. What? She pressed her lips together, tears spilling over. My husband's debt. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. My son? I whispered. She nodded. He didn't know, she said quickly. I was trying to protect him. Protect him. The phrase echoed in my mind, bitter and sharp. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words, my husband's debt, kept echoing in my head, as if my mind was trying to rearrange them into something that made sense. Adam had always been careful with money, cautious. After his father died, he learned the hard way how quickly stability could disappear. What kind of debt? I finally asked. Lena wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a faint red streak across her cheek. It started before we got married, she said. Just a little at first. Credit cards, a loan he took out to help a friend. I frowned. Adam never mentioned any of this. He wouldn't, she replied. He was ashamed. That word, ashamed, sat heavy in my chest. He told me he had it under control, she continued, that it would be gone before we married, and for a while it looked like it was. She paused, staring down at her hands. Then the interest piled up. He missed a payment, then another. I started getting calls, letters, notices he hid from me. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking beneath my weight. And you didn't come to me? I said. I didn't want to, she whispered. I thought if I could just fix it quietly, no one would get hurt. My throat tightened. By using my name? Her shoulders shook as she nodded. I knew you had good credit. I knew the bank would approve it if I listed you as guarantor. I thought I'd pay it back before you ever noticed. I stared at her, anger and sadness tangled together so tightly I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And Adam? I asked. He still doesn't know? She shook her head. No, and I don't know how to tell him. I closed my eyes. In that moment, I wasn't just angry at Lena. I was angry at the quiet way secrets grow in families, how love turns into silence and silence turns into damage. Why didn't you come to me? I asked again, softer this time. I would have helped. She looked up, eyes glassy. Because you already lost so much, she said. Your husband, years of savings. I couldn't be the person who took more. Something in my chest cracked. And yet, I said gently, you did. She nodded, tears dripping onto the table. I cried at your birthday because you were smiling, because everyone was celebrating you, and all I could think was that I'd betrayed the one person who'd always been kind to me. Silence filled the room. I thought of Adam as a boy, counting coins at the kitchen table, asking me which bills could wait. I thought of the nights we'd spent worrying together, promising we'd always be honest. Does he know now? She asked. She shook her head. No, and I don't know how to tell him. I folded my hands, steadying myself. Then we will, I said. Her head snapped up. What? We will tell him, I repeated. Together. Fear flashed across her face. He'll hate me. He might, I said honestly, but lies rot marriages from the inside out. You don't fix debt with deception. She nodded slowly, understanding settling in. When? She asked. Tonight, I said. Adam arrived just after dinner. He greeted us with a smile that faded the moment he sensed the tension in the room. What's going on? He asked. I gestured for him to sit. Lena clasped her hands together so tightly her knuckles turned white. Adam, I said, there's something you need to hear. He looked between us, his brow furrowing. You're scaring me. Lena took a breath. I took out a loan, she said, her voice shaking, in your mother's name. His face went blank. What? He asked. It was to pay off your debt, the one you thought you'd buried. The room seemed to tilt. Adam stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the kitchen. You told me it was gone. You promised me. I know, she sobbed. I was trying to fix it. By lying? He snapped. Adam, I said. He turned to me, eyes wild. She used your credit, your name. I know. That's why we're here. He sank back in the chair, head in his hands. I didn't want you dragged into this, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want anyone to know how badly I messed up. I reached across the table and took his hand. You didn't protect me by hiding. You just made the fall harder. He looked at Lena then, really looked at her. I never asked you to do this, he said quietly. I know. I chose wrong. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Adam exhaled. We'll fix it, he said, all of it, together. Relief washed over Lena's face, but mine stayed tight. There are consequences, I said. The loan is still active. My name is still on it. Adam nodded. We'll pay it back. I'll take extra shifts, sell the car if I have to. I watched him, this grown man, still willing to sacrifice everything to make things right. That night, they left holding hands, but the air between us was changed forever. After they left, I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chairs. Trust isn't something that shatters loudly. It cracks quietly in places you don't notice until it's too late. And while the truth was finally out, I knew this was only the beginning, because families don't heal the moment secrets are spoken. They heal or break in what comes next. The days after the truth came out felt heavier than the days when I didn't know. That surprised me. I'd always believed that honesty, once spoken, would lift the weight off everyone's chest. Instead, it shifted the weight, pressed it into different places. Adam stopped calling every day. Lena became quiet in a way that felt smaller, not distant, but ashamed. And I carried a new awareness. Every time I opened my wallet, every time I glanced at my bank app, every time I thought about the house I'd worked decades to keep. This wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. It was practical, measurable, ticking forward with interest. Still, I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't call lawyers or accuse anyone of ruining my life. Not because I wasn't angry, but because anger, when left unchecked, has a way of burning down the wrong house. Instead, I made a list. I wrote down everything that needed to be done. Numbers, deadlines, options. I called the bank again, requested full documentation, and scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor recommended by a woman at the library who whispered the name like a secret weapon. I also set boundaries. The next time Adam came over, I handed him a printed folder. This is the loan, I said. This is the payment schedule. And this, I tapped the page, is the date my retirement savings become vulnerable if it's not under control. He swallowed. I'll handle it. You won't, I said calmly. We will, but there are rules now. He looked at me, surprised by my tone. No more secrets, I continued. No more trying to be the hero by bleeding quietly. If something changes, I hear about it first. He nodded. You're right. And Lena, I added, needs to rebuild my trust, not with apologies, with action. He nodded again, eyes wet. Lena called me that night. I want to do better, she said. Tell me how. Her voice sounded raw, honest. Then listen, I replied, and don't interrupt. She didn't. I don't hate you, I said, but I am hurt, deeply. You took something that wasn't yours, not just my name, but my safety. I know, she whispered. You don't get to fix that by crying or promising. You fix it by standing in the discomfort and doing the work. I will, she said, whatever it takes. Good, then here's where we start. I told her she would attend every meeting with me, every call, every conversation with the bank, not as punishment, but as accountability. And she agreed. The first meeting was tense. The financial advisor, a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and softer eyes, listened carefully as I explained the situation. She didn't judge, she didn't scold, she just nodded and took notes. This can be managed, but it will require discipline and transparency. She glanced at Lena. Are you prepared for that? Lena straightened her back. Yes. I watched her closely. This wasn't the timid woman who folded her hands and apologized for existing. This was someone facing consequences. It mattered. We set up a repayment plan, a stricter budget, a timeline. Adam sold his car, Lena took on extra work, they canceled vacations they'd planned and dinners they couldn't afford. I didn't rescue them. That was the hardest part. There were moments, quiet ones, where I wanted to step in, write a check, erase the discomfort, but I knew better. Rescue without accountability teaches nothing. What I offered instead was presence. The truth didn't stay private for long. It never does. Adam's sister-in-law noticed the car was gone. Someone at work overheard Lena turning down a lunch because she'd packed leftovers. Whispers formed, half-truths stitched together by curiosity. At a family gathering, someone joked, "Saving up for something big?" The room went quiet. Adam cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "we're paying off debt. No excuses, no lies." I felt something shift inside me then. One afternoon, a few months later, Lena came over alone. She stood in my kitchen holding an envelope. "This is the first major payment. We sold some inventory and—" She paused. "I wanted you to see it." I opened the envelope and nodded. "Thank you," I said. She hesitated. "Do you hate me?" I looked at her for a long moment. Hate requires distance, and I'm still here. Her eyes filled, but this time she didn't cry. She nodded, accepting the truth of that. The birthday came again the next year. No big party, just dinner. 3 of us at the table. When I cut the cake, Lena watched me carefully. I met her gaze and smiled. She smiled back, tentative but real. And for the first time since that night a year before, the candles didn't feel like they were burning something away. They felt like they were lighting something new. If there's one thing I've learned in my 62 years, it's that consequences don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they come wrapped in everyday moments, missed opportunities, changed relationships, a different way people look at you when they know the truth. And those quiet consequences can weigh heavier than public shame. Word spread slowly through our extended family, not in full sentences, not with names attached, but in fragments. They're struggling. Something about money. Did you hear they sold the car? No one asked me directly, but I felt the shift at gatherings, the way conversations paused when I entered a room, the way Lena stayed closer to Adam's side, her hand always finding his sleeve like an anchor. At a cousin's anniversary dinner, an aunt leaned over and whispered, "Everything okay with the kids?" I smiled politely. "They're learning." That was all I said. Lena, on the other hand, carried the weight openly. She stopped volunteering opinions, stopped trying to please. She showed up early and stayed late, cleaned up without being asked, listened more than she spoke, not out of fear, but humility. And people noticed. At first, they mistook it for weakness. "She's changed," someone muttered once, not realizing I was within earshot. "She used to be so lively." I said nothing. Change doesn't owe anyone an explanation. The real public consequence came in an unexpected place, Adam's job. One afternoon, he came to my house looking like he'd aged 5 years. "They passed me over for the promotion," he said, dropping into a chair. "I'm sorry," I replied. "They said I wasn't reliable enough yet, that I'd been distracted." He laughed, but it wasn't amused. "Funny how your personal mess follows you into places you thought were separate." I watched him rub his face, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "This is part of it," I said gently. "You can't undo the past, but you can show consistency." "I know," he said. "I just thought—" "I know," I interrupted softly. Later that week, Lena confided in me that she'd turned down an opportunity to expand her business. "I can't take risks right now, not until this is behind us." There was no resentment in her voice, just acceptance. That mattered more than any apology she'd ever offered. One evening, we attended a small community fundraiser together, nothing fancy. Folding chairs, coffee and paper cups, familiar faces. I noticed how Lena stayed slightly behind me as we entered, letting me lead conversations, giving me space, not because I demanded it, but because she respected it. At a point, a woman I barely knew approached us. "You must be so proud of your son, and his wife, too. They're really committed to making things work." I glanced at Lena. She didn't smile. She didn't shrink. She nodded. "We are." That simple acknowledgement felt like a turning point, not denial, not defensiveness, ownership. Months passed. Payments were made. Balances shrank, slowly, painfully. I stayed involved, but not controlling. I asked questions. I reviewed statements. I offered guidance when asked. I didn't offer rescue. And in return, something unexpected happened. Trust didn't snap back into place, but it began to rebuild brick by careful brick. The day the loan balance dropped below half, Lena brought me coffee. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just set the cup down in front of me. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For not giving up on us," she replied. "I considered that." "I didn't stay because you're family," I said. "I stayed because you chose to face what you did." Her eyes filled, not with guilt this time, but relief. The biggest test came the following winter. Adam slipped on ice outside their apartment and fractured his wrist. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to keep him from working overtime for weeks. They came to me, faces tight with worry. "We're going to miss a payment," Adam said. I took a deep breath. "How much?" I asked. He told me. I thought about my savings, about the house, about the promise I'd made to myself not to fix things the old way. "Here's what we'll do. I'll cover it, once, and it will be documented." Lena immediately nodded. "We'll repay you." "I will," I agreed, "and this doesn't reset our progress." Relief washed over them, but not entitlement. That distinction mattered. By spring, the tension that once filled every room had softened, not disappeared, but changed shape. We laughed again, carefully, honestly. At another family gathering, someone made a comment about rough patches in marriage. Adam glanced at Lena, then at me. "We've had ours," he said, "but we're stronger for it." No one argued. That night, after everyone left, Lena stayed behind. "I want you to know that I'll never forget what I did or what you chose not to do." I met her gaze. "Good." She smiled faintly. "Not forgetting keeps us honest." As she walked out, I realized something. The consequence she feared most, the loss of respect, had already happened. What she was earning now was something far rarer, a second chance built on truth. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small, almost invisible moments, when you realize you've gone a full day without replaying old conversations in your head, or when laughter slips out before you've had time to guard it. For me, healing began the day I stopped checking the loan balance every morning. Not because the debt was gone, it wasn't, but because I trusted the process, and more importantly, I trusted the people involved in it. That trust felt different than before. Before, it had been soft and untested, like a promise made in sunlight. Now it was sturdier, scarred, earned. Lena began coming over again, slowly at first, not with baked goods or forced cheer, but with quiet presence. She'd sit with me while I folded laundry, handing me socks and asking about my day. Sometimes she'd help in the garden, her hands clumsy with soil, apologizing to the plants like they could hear her. "You don't have to say sorry to them," I told her once. She smiled faintly. "Old habit." One afternoon, while we worked side by side, she said, "I used to think love meant fixing everything before anyone noticed it was broken." I looked at her. "And now?" "Now I think love means letting people see the cracks," she said, "even when it's embarrassing." I nodded. "Especially then." Adam changed too. He became more deliberate, more honest. He talked to me about money, really talked, asked questions, admitted when he didn't understand something. One evening he stayed late helping me fix a loose cabinet hinge. "He didn't realize how much I hid from you growing up," he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "You weren't that sneaky." He smiled. "I mean, emotionally. I thought being strong meant not needing help." I handed him the screwdriver. "Strength is knowing when to ask." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. The loan was paid off faster than expected, not because of a windfall, but because of consistency. Small payments, extra hours, sacrifices that added up. The day Lena brought me the final statement, she didn't cry. She just handed it to me and waited. I read the page carefully, my eyes lingering on the zero balance. Then I folded the paper and placed it on the table. "It's done," I said. Her shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but release. "Thank you," she whispered. I shook my head. "You did this." We marked the moment quietly. No dinner, no speeches, just tea in my kitchen. The clock ticked. The fig tree rustled outside. "Do you forgive me?" Lena asked. I took my time answering. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a practice. And yes, I'm practicing." She nodded, understanding. The next birthday came sooner than I expected. This time, Lena helped me plan it. "Just something small, no surprises." She laughed softly. "Deal." On the day of, the table was set with mismatched plates and simple food. Adam lit the candles. As everyone sang, I watched Lena's face. She was smiling, not forced, not fearful. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. I blew out the candles. The room didn't hold its breath. Later that evening, when the guests had gone and the dishes were drying, Lena lingered. "I need to tell you something," she said. My heart stilled, not from fear this time, but habit. "I'm pregnant." The words hung between us. My first instinct was caution, my second was joy. I reached out and took her hand. "Thank you for telling me." She smiled through tears. "I wanted it to be honest from the beginning." I squeezed her fingers. "That matters." That night, after they left, I sat alone at the table again, just like I had so many times before. But this time, the emptiness didn't feel heavy. It felt open. I thought about the woman I'd been before, the one who believed love meant staying quiet, staying out of the way, and the woman I was now, still gentle, still patient, but no longer invisible. Boundaries hadn't hardened my heart, they'd protected it. In the months that followed, I prepared for a new role, not as a savior, not as a silent supporter, but as someone present, honest, and unafraid to speak when something didn't feel right. When the baby was born, Lena placed her in my arms and whispered, "I want her to grow up knowing the truth matters." I looked down at that small, perfect face and nodded. So do I. The months rolled on quietly after the baby arrived. I spent my mornings in the garden, my afternoons reading, and my evenings holding the little one while Lena and Adam took turns resting or working on chores. The apartment smelled of warm bread and baby lotion, a combination that somehow felt like home and safety all at once. I watched my son become a father, careful and gentle in ways that made me proud, and I watched Lena, my daughter-in-law, the one who had cried on my birthday a year ago, grow into a woman who carried her past mistakes lightly but firmly, like a cloak she had woven herself. It wasn't perfection. There were still tense moments. Bills arrived, arguments flared. Adam sometimes forgot to call, and Lena sometimes doubted herself. But they faced those moments together, not in secret, not by hiding behind my shoulders, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, I was helping Lena fold baby clothes. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "All the time." She hesitated. "Do you resent me?" I shook my head slowly. "Not in the way you think. I was hurt, yes, but resentment keeps you chained to the moment it happened. I chose to unchain myself." Her fingers paused on a tiny onesie. "I don't know how I would have survived without you," she admitted. I smiled softly. "You survived because you decided to face the consequences. You just didn't know you had a guide." We sat in silence for a few moments, the baby cooing softly in her crib nearby. There was a peace that hadn't existed a year ago, a quiet, steady hum that filled the spaces between our words. I reflected often on that birthday, the one when she cried in my kitchen and I didn't yet understand why. At the time, I had felt a mix of confusion, embarrassment, and fear. But now, in hindsight, I could see it for what it really was, a moment of honesty, a crack in her composure that allowed the truth to slip through. And that truth, as painful as it had ultimately brought us closer together. I realized something essential that I hadn't understood before. Love doesn't mean never being hurt. It doesn't mean never facing betrayal. It doesn't mean protecting others from reality at all costs. Love is choosing honesty over comfort, choosing accountability over silence, choosing presence over perfection. Adam, Lena, and the baby had come to rely on me, not because I had solved everything, but because I had stayed steady when the world felt unsteady. And in doing so, I realized that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about creating a space where mistakes can be acknowledged, addressed, and transformed. The baby laughed one afternoon, a bright, bubbling sound that seemed to shake the air itself. Lena smiled down at her, her eyes glistening with tears that were no longer shameful, but full of love and hope. I watched them and felt a swell of pride, not just for the new life, but for the resilience of the family that had almost fallen apart, for the honesty that had rebuilt it. I thought about my own reflection in the kitchen window, how the lines on my face had deepened over the year, how my hands bore the subtle marks of worry and labor, and I realized something else. Strength is not about avoiding the storms, but about standing through them with grace. I didn't forgive everything immediately. Forgiveness was a slow work, like tending a plant. But each day I felt the weight lift a little more, and each day I could see Lena stepping more fully into herself, her honesty guiding her decisions. We were no longer bound by fear. We were bound by choice. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to the birthday cake, to her tears, to the fear that had filled that small kitchen, and I realize now that it was a turning point, not because it was dramatic, not because it was shocking, but because it was human, real, and because we chose to respond to it with clarity, patience, and love. I think that's the lesson I want to leave with anyone who might hear this story. Life will test your patience. Life will test your trust. But when honesty, courage, and compassion guide your choices, even betrayal can become a doorway to understanding and growth. The world outside our little home continued to turn. People came and went, bills arrived, tasks needed doing. But inside, we had found a rhythm, a quiet understanding that no one could take away. And the baby, of course, grew every day, her laughter a reminder that life moves forward, that innocence and honesty can heal even the deepest wounds. As I sit here now, writing this story down, I think about the way life's smallest moments can carry the heaviest weight. A tear shed at a birthday, a hidden signature on a bank form, a whispered confession across a kitchen table. These weren't grand gestures or cinematic betrayals. They were real life, messy and human, filled with the kind of emotion that creeps up slowly, settles deep, and refuses to let you ignore it. When Lena cried that day, I didn't understand her. I felt embarrassment, confusion, and yes, a prickling anger I hadn't known I had. But looking back now, I see that moment as a bridge, one that led to honesty, accountability, and eventually healing. Families are complicated. Relationships are fragile. Trust, once broken, isn't easily restored. But what I've learned is this: the path to healing isn't paved with perfection, it's paved with choices. Choices to face the truth, to own your mistakes, to let go of pride when it's standing in the way of connection, and most importantly, to stay present when others falter, even when it's difficult. Lena made mistakes, big ones, but she also had the courage to face them, to take responsibility, to work, not just for herself, but for the family she was now part of. And I chose, day after day, to meet that courage with patience, guidance, and honest expectations. I didn't rescue her. I didn't shield her from consequences. I offered presence, accountability, and love. There were moments I doubted myself, moments when I wondered if I should have yelled or stormed out or shut the door forever. But I realized something essential. Anger and blame only create distance. Healing and true growth requires steadiness, it requires dignity, and it requires listening, really listening to the truth, even when it's painful. Now, months later, we're in a different place entirely. Adam and Lena's relationship is stronger because of transparency. Their marriage is honest because it's been tested. And our family, as messy, human, and imperfect as it is richer for it. I watch Lena with the baby and see not the woman who hid secrets, but the woman who learned the hardest lessons and let them shape her into someone better. I watch Adam step carefully into his responsibilities, no longer ashamed, but aware, thoughtful, and brave in ways I hadn't expected. And I watch myself, the mother, the grandmother, the witness to all of it, and I understand that my role wasn't to fix everything. My role was to stay steady, to guide, and to forgive when the time was right. This story isn't just about money or lies or tears shed at a birthday. It's about choices, about how we respond to mistakes, about how love can survive if we meet it with honesty and courage. And maybe, if there's one thing I hope anyone hearing this takes away, it's this. We can't control others. We can't always prevent pain, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose patience over anger, understanding over resentment, presence over withdrawal. And in those choices, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. I wonder, as I finish writing this, about you. Yes, you listening or reading. Have you ever faced a betrayal that shook you to your core? Did you meet it with anger, silence, or understanding? And if you could do it again, would you respond differently? Life doesn't give us a second chance to live a moment over, but it does give us a second chance to act wisely after the storm has passed. That's the lesson I carry now, and it's one I hope you carry too. If this story touched you or reminded you of someone you love, or even someone you've struggled with, take a moment today to reach out, speak honestly, listen fully, let truth and courage guide your actions. And if you want to hear more stories like this about families, secrets, betrayal, and redemption, subscribe and join us in these shared human experiences. Because life is messy, and together we can navigate it with heart. Spring arrived in a slow, gentle way that year, carrying warmth, soft sunlight, and the faint scent of jasmine through our windows. I often found myself sitting in the garden, cup of tea in hand, listening to the quiet rhythms of the day. The baby's laughter sometimes floated from the apartment above, Lena humming softly as she tended to her little one, Adam reading quietly in the corner. And in those moments, the past, the betrayals, the tears, the fear, felt like a shadow that had passed through and left us stronger. I thought back to that birthday, the tears, the secret loan, and the conversations that followed. It all seemed almost unreal, like a storm we'd survived but couldn't fully describe. The kitchen table where Lena confessed, the quiet living room where Adam listened, the long nights of discussion and planning, they weren't dramatic in the way movies depict betrayal. They were human, they were slow, they were deeply emotional, and they had led us to this. Healing, I realized, is less about forgetting and more about acknowledging, about remembering that pain can teach us if we're willing to sit with it and let it guide us toward better choices. Lena had learned this, Adam had learned this, and I had learned too. I had learned that sometimes being a mother, a grandmother, or even just a witness doesn't mean stepping in to fix everything. It means staying steady when chaos threatens to tip the world over, offering guidance without taking control, and allowing others to take responsibility while you remain present. That, I think, is true strength. One afternoon, I caught Lena and Adam laughing together over something trivial. The baby wiggled in Lena's arms, trying to reach for the sunlight streaming through the window. I smiled quietly from my chair, a deep, full smile that I hadn't felt in a long time. There was peace here, not a naive, careless peace, but a hard-earned, rooted kind of peace. "You've changed," Lena said softly when she noticed me watching. "Not just me, all of us." I nodded. "I think we all have." "And the baby," she added, "she's lucky." I looked at the child and felt a warmth that had little to do with family ties and everything to do with truth, honesty, and the choices we make. That little life would grow up in a household that had weathered storms, faced them honestly, and come out stronger. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past year. I thought about the tears at my birthday, the ones I had misunderstood, the ones I had feared. They were not just sorrow, they were the beginning of transformation. They were honesty bleeding through fear, and in that honesty, a bridge was built. And now, standing on the other side of that bridge, I felt a clarity I hadn't felt before. I realized something fundamental. Love isn't about avoiding mistakes. Love isn't about never being hurt. Love is about facing the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Love is about giving second chances when they are earned. And love is about learning to grow together through adversity. I poured myself another cup of tea and gazed out at the garden, noticing the tender shoots of new plants breaking through the soil. Life moves forward always, in its quiet, deliberate way. And just like those plants, we too have the chance to grow stronger, rooted in lessons learned, nourished by honesty, and stretched toward light. I smiled, thinking about Lena's tears, Adam's silence, and the way we had all stumbled forward together. We had faced betrayal, confusion, fear, and shame, but we had also faced courage, humility, and forgiveness. And in that balance, we found something remarkable: resilience. As I closed the window and settled into my chair, I thought about the audience who might hear this story, about people sitting alone or at kitchen tables or in bedrooms where secrets weigh heavily on hearts. I wanted them to know something important. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot prevent every mistake, but you can choose honesty over deceit, presence over withdrawal, and courage over silence. These choices matter. They change lives, not always immediately, but inevitably. And finally, I allowed myself one more quiet, reflective thought. Sometimes the tears we fear, the confessions we dread, and the mistakes we can't undo are exactly what teach us how to love fully, how to forgive genuinely, and how to build trust that lasts. My daughter-in-law cried at my birthday, but through that tear, through that trembling confession, we all learned how to move forward. We learned that families are not perfect, but they can be real. And that truth, even when painful, can ultimately lead to grace. So I ask you, whoever is listening now, have you faced someone's tear that didn't make sense at the time? Have you discovered a secret that shook your trust to the core? And did you meet it with anger or with patience and courage? Because the answers to those questions shape not just the relationships around us, but the people we become. And if this story has touched you or made you pause or reminded you of a truth in your own family, I encourage you to share it, to reflect on it, and to carry it forward in your life. Be present, be honest, face the hard conversations, and never underestimate the power of second chances. Because sometimes the tears we think break us are exactly the ones that teach us how to love fully, how to forgive genuinely, and how to build trust that lasts.